Welcome to TEDxSiliconAlley. This evening, you will hear from 19 speakers. They will come from New York tech startups, some established technology companies.
The speaker's order. He just emailed it to me 5 minutes ago.
And from other players in the digital media space. And they're each going to share with you their idea worth spreading. And they've been asked to speak based upon a theme. The theme is the creative use of technology beyond its originally intended application with unexpected or unintended outcomes, either for good or for bad or for unknown. And while that might sound like a mouthful, it could actually practically be a definition for the advancements of almost all technologies. I'm going to go through a couple of historical examples here that kind of fit this theme. One of my favorites is a fellow named Percy Spencer. He was an engineer working on radar systems for Raytheon. And he liked to eat candy bars. And he was servicing a Megatron for a radar system. And he had a candy bar. Did I lose my mic there? He had a candy bar in his shirt pocket. And when he leaned over this Megatron, he realized that his whole candy bar melted into his pocket. So like any good engineer, he went and looked for more food. And he found popcorn kernels. And he brought them back in a paper sack, and he put them on top of the Megatron, and sure enough, the popcorn kernels popped in this paper bag. And within a year, Percy was the patent holder of the microwave oven. Another historical example will also end up being pretty relevant later in this talk was the launch of Sputnik. When the Soviets launched Sputnik, there was a group of engineers at MIT, and they figured out by the second day that they could track Sputnik's movement through space because it had a radio transmitter on it. And using a Doppler effect, they could tell where in the sky it was passing over. And by the third day, they realized, well, wait a second. If we're here on the ground, and that's transmitting a radio signal up there, and we can tell where it is, if we took this same equation and flipped it around in reverse, a satellite would be able to tell precisely where we're at on the ground. And it was 3 days after the launch of Sputnik that the concept for the Global Positioning System, GPS, the seeds were sown for that concept. And the first use of that sort of technology was for helping submarines navigate. So it didn't emerge very often. And then it started being used for things like, where the bombs are supposed to fall. And eventually it was released into the private sector and it started to be used for commercial airline flight. And eventually it made it down to consumers, and we use that to find the nearest Starbucks on a device that we carry in our pocket. Now, the same concept also applies in a similar way when a tech startup has a concept and they launch it and they don't know how users are going to use it. And they think they know how they might, and they bring something to market, and then they find out users use it in a different way than they thought they were going to, and they have to pivot their business plan and make it actually conform to the way their product is actually used. And this is Jack, one of the founders of Twitter. And when they launched Twitter, they just didn't even bother worrying about how people were going to use it. It was a simple platform to build. They just went ahead and launched it and said, well, we'll figure out what the business plan is later. We're just going to launch it and wait and see how people use it. I'm sorry, I keep having to come back over here to advance the slides. So there were many unexpected ways that people ended up using it. Well, let's see what Jack has to say about New York. Now I'm going to talk about what makes New York and the tech scene in our city unique compared to some other places. It's not like we have a short list of things that make New York unique, but specific to the tech scene here and differentiating it from those in many other cities, I identify a few things that we have. Finance. We have a local source of capital here in abundance. Media. We have broadcast, print production. We have the music industry. We have, where we're at now, the advertising industry. If content is king, then New York is king of content. And a lot of people wouldn't think of fashion as being in the technology space. The Fashion 2.0 meetup, just off the top of my head, I think it has something like 2,500 members here. And what other city in the world has their largest tech company with over $1 billion valuation is a fashion brand? We're going to have Alexandra from Gilt Group speaking later today. We also have local city government that's supportive. But what I think is really unique about New York compared to any other city in this country is that the US is a car culture country. New York City is really the only walking culture city that we have. And that makes us do things a little bit different here. And as a consequence to that, we're the largest smartphone market. And if you think about, if you're in a car culture city, like the rest of the country, you have a dashboard, you have your in-console stereo system, your OnStar, your GPS navigational system. You have all of this other technology built into your automobile that you're getting input and output. When you're walking, this is what you've got. And this basically serves the purpose of everything else in a vehicle that somebody's using anywhere else in any other city. And it shouldn't be any big surprise that a company like Foursquare would come out of a city like New York. This is the fastest growing media channel. As of this year, smartphones, not just cell phones, smartphones, there are more of these now in the market than all of those combined. Desktops, laptops, this is the computer now. This is the dominant platform. And obviously we have a cultural diversity that really no other city has. I was pretty enthusiastic. I thought I was going to be able to come out here and say that we had not one, two, but three Persians, but Soraya Darabi actually had some conflicts in her schedule and had to drop. But we have two Persians and a Russian. Brits are represented. We have a Russian speaking. How many cities would have that kind of cultural diversity among their speakers at a tech convention. So on that note, I'm going to move on to I'm going to introduce my co-host, Kelly Jesus, and she's going to come out and talk to you, and then we're going to hear what these other 19 speakers we have today have to say. Thank you.